My dad always told me never to open the locked chest in his office. I finally did. Inside was a wedding dress covered in blood. Before we begin, please like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's all be internet friends. The chest was in the corner, same as always. Olive green metal, the paint scraped off at the edges. It sat like a permanent fixture, heavier than the desk, colder than the floorboards. I'd vacuumed around it growing up, dusted the top when he told me to, but never touched the lock. It was off limits, no negotiation, just a rule. He used to say, "That's classified." Always with that tone. Half joke, half warning. But even when I was 6, I knew not to push. Not with him. Dad's office smelled like varnish and leather. The blinds were always closed. No family photos on the walls. Just medals, maps, his old dog tags nailed to the side of a bookshelf. It was a room built for silence. I hadn't been back in here since the funeral. The desk was still organized the way he kept it, pens straight, papers clipped, no dust on the keyboard. His chair creaked when I sat in it, and I didn't let it lean too far back. The idea of breaking something felt wrong. Like I'd set off an alarm only he could hear. It took hours to go through the drawers, mostly manuals, receipts. A few letters from old friends with return addresses I didn't recognize, no names, just initials. A stack of old newspapers, yellowed and brittle, all folded open to the classifieds. He'd circled things, but not houses or jobs, just random words. Ceremony, disappeared. June. I almost didn't check the watch drawer. It was tucked beneath his dresser, velvet-lined, filled with scratched-up wristwatches and one sharp, silver tie pin. But when I pulled it out all the way, the liner peeled slightly at the corner. Underneath, taped flat to the wood, was a small key. Brass, unlabeled, cold. I knew what it was for before I even held it up. The chest sat exactly where it always had. I stared at it for a long time, thought about leaving it there, about putting the key back and walking away. But I didn't, because he was gone, and whatever he'd locked away, it belonged to me now. He used to call it classified, like he was still on base, still surrounded by codes and clearances and a chain of command. Any time I asked about the chest, his whole body would shift, jaw tight, eyes hard, a full shutdown. The first time I asked, I was maybe 9, I thought there were souvenirs inside, medals, maybe photos from deployment. I asked if I could see what was in it just once. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. "Some things aren't yours to carry," he snapped. I remember the exact words, because he'd never spoken to me like that before. He was strict but not cruel, private but not cold. But that day, he shut the drawer he was working in, stood up, and pointed at the door. "That chest is off limits." I never asked again. He wasn't a violent man, but there was something sharp in his presence. Something you didn't lean too close to. People respected him before they even knew his name. And in our house, his silence was the loudest thing. He kept routines like they were orders. Ironed his shirts the same way every week. Lined his shoes up under the bed in perfect pairs. Paid cash for everything. Never left a receipt lying out. Always folded his napkin twice before setting it on the table. That chest was part of the pattern. Even when I was in high school and started sneaking into his office to grab notebooks or pens, I never touched it. Not because I was scared, because I was sure he'd know, like it would trigger something built into his bones. One time, he caught me sitting in the office chair, doodling on the notepad he kept by the lamp. He didn't yell. He didn't say anything at all. Just walked in, took the pen from my hand, and turned off the light. Didn't even look at me. The silence said enough. That's how he kept you in line, not with threats, with weight, with the kind of stillness that made your stomach twist. I used to imagine what was inside. Old love letters, maps, maybe a gun, maybe ashes. Theories turned into stories, but they always ended the same way, with him saying no, and me backing down. Until now, my mother never stepped foot in his office. Not once. Not in all the years I lived under that roof. If she needed him, she knocked. One tap. Then waited in the hallway until he came out. She never crossed the threshold. I didn't notice it when I was younger. It just seemed like part of their arrangement. She had her spaces, the kitchen, the garden, the sunroom where she kept her puzzles and crossword books. He had this. But I remember one night when I was 12, sitting at the top of the stairs, listening to them argue. Quietly. like they were afraid of waking something, his voice low, hers tighter. "You don't get to decide what's too much," she said. "You weren't there," he replied. "You don't know what I had to do." There was a pause, then she said maybe not. But she's going to ask one day. That was the only time I heard her challenge him about it. The next morning, the door to his office was closed like always, and she avoided it like it was radioactive. Years later, I asked her why. She was watering her plants. It was summer. She didn't look up from the soil. "That room belongs to his past," she said. "Let it be." I asked if it was about the war. About what he saw, she just shook her head. "It's not about what he saw, Claire. It's about what he brought back." I didn't know what that meant. Not then. I thought maybe it was just trauma, nightmares. I'd heard him in his sleep before, once or twice, muttering names, kicking at the sheets. I figured it was Afghanistan, or Bosnia, or one of the places he never mentioned by name. But now, standing in the center of that room, looking at the chest in the corner, I wasn't so sure anymore. I reached out and ran my fingers along the lid. It was cold, and I hadn't even used the key yet. He died without telling me anything. No final words, no deathbed confession. Just a sharp decline, a quiet hospice room, and then nothing. It didn't feel right, not because of how fast it happened, but because of how quiet he made it. No obituary, no funeral photo, no military send-off, even though he had the medals, the rank, the whole damn career. He left instructions in an envelope taped to the fridge: cremation, no service, no honors. My mother followed it to the letter. He was gone in 3 days. Just ash in a black box with his name etched into a metal plate. Not even the full name. Just T.R. Jennings. The living room was full of casseroles from people who didn't really know him. They spoke softly like grief was contagious. No one cried. There was nothing to cry through. He'd closed every door before he left. I kept expecting to feel something. Guilt, anger, relief. Instead, it was this dull weight. Like holding a sealed envelope you're afraid to open, because whatever's inside will change the shape of everything that came before. After the cremation, Mom handed me a box of his things. Watch, wallet, dog tags, no letters, no notes. The watch was still ticking, the wallet was empty, and the dog tags, they didn't even list a blood type. "Are you okay?" I asked her once, a week after. She was staring at the TV, muted, static playing behind a paused movie. She said he wanted the quiet. I'm just giving it to him. But the silence didn't feel like a request. It felt like a cover. And now I was standing in his office, with the key still in my hand, and the chest in front of me like it had been waiting for this moment. Like he'd left it behind not to hide something, but to dare me to look. I found the key in his watch drawer, taped under the velvet lining like he'd hoped it would stay hidden just long enough. Or maybe he wanted it found. Just not by accident. The tape had yellowed, brittle with age. The key came off with a soft crack, small, brass, unmarked, not one of the generic kinds you get from a hardware store. This one had weight. It looked like something from another time. I sat on the edge of his chair, rolling it between my fingers, staring at the chest. It looked the same as always. Military issue, reinforced corners. A black stenciled serial number faded along the front. There was no dust on the lid, like he'd wiped it recently, maybe even opened it. I didn't reach for the lock, not yet. Instead, I walked out to the kitchen, found Mom standing by the sink, hands still wet from washing. She turned when she heard me, looked down, saw the key in my hand. Her shoulders dropped. "I found it in his drawer," I said. "I figured you would," she replied. "You knew." She nodded once slowly. "I always knew he kept something in there, but not what." "You never asked." She dried her hands on a towel. "Your father didn't answer questions. He issued statements." I waited. She looked at me carefully. "Some things in that chest might not belong to you, Claire, even if they're yours now." "I need to know." "I know," she said. "But you should ask yourself, what good ever comes from digging up ghosts?" She wasn't trying to stop me. Not really. Just reminding me that doors, once opened, don't always close the same way. I went back into the office. Closed the door behind me, sat down in front of the chest and stared at the key again. Then I leaned forward, slid it into the lock, and turned. It didn't smell like dust. It should have after all these years, after sitting in the corner of that sealed room, untouched, unloved, it should have smelled old. forgotten. But when the lid cracked open, the air that came out was sharp. Metal and something else. Not rot. Not mold, something colder. Like dried sweat soaked into fabric, like copper. I opened it the rest of the way and sat back. The wedding dress was the first thing I saw, folded, carefully, deliberately, tucked like it had been meant for storage, not abandonment. It was once white, I could tell that much. But now it had yellowed at the edges, the fabric fragile, the weight of time pressing into every crease. Lace at the collar. Tiny pearl buttons down the back. The kind of dress you don't wear unless it matters. Except this one was stained. The blood wasn't everywhere, just a splash across the left side of the bodice. A deep, rust-colored smear that spread and dried in uneven patterns. It wasn't fresh. Wasn't new, but it was real. Underneath it, bundled in the skirt, was a bouquet, dried roses. Brown at the edges, stems cracked. Still tied with ribbon. Pale blue, I didn't touch anything, just stared. There were Polaroids next. Tucked in a sealed envelope beside the bouquet, I slid them out slowly. The woman in the photos was wearing the dress. Same collar, same buttons, same bouquet in her hands. She stood in front of a plain chapel door, smiling, eyes wide. Not staged, something in her expression was real. Happy, nervous, caught mid-laugh in one frame, and beside her him, younger, clean-shaven, T.R. Jennings in a tuxedo, his arm wrapped tight around her waist. His eyes didn't look at the camera, they looked at her. The final item in the chest was a thick manila envelope. No label, no stamps, just sealed shut with aged tape. I ran my thumb along the edge. Inside, something shifted. Paper, lots of it. I sat back, my pulse hammering. Nothing in that chest was supposed to look like me, but the woman in those photos, she could have been my sister. She looked like me. Not in a vague, everyone has a double kind of way, not like resemblance. Like replication, same jawline, same cheekbones, same slant to the eyes. Her hair was darker, curled tighter, but the structure was mine, or maybe mine was hers. In the photo where she was laughing, her head tilted slightly to the left. That same unconscious angle I'd seen in my own reflection 1,000 times. Same smile, same dimple, same front tooth with the barely noticeable chip. She was wearing the dress. The dress that now sat stained and brittle in front of me. In the photo, it was pristine. No blood, no tear at the waist, just a perfect fit. She stood beside him, his arm looped confidently around her, her hand resting lightly on his chest. He wasn't smiling, not fully. But he wasn't cold either. He looked present, focused, like this mattered to him. I flipped through the stack, breath shallow. Another photo, the two of them walking down a set of church steps. Her veil pinned, shoes peeking out under the hem. His hand holding hers. The sidewalk blurry, sun glaring in one corner. Another, them in front of a mirror. He's adjusting her necklace. She's looking at their reflection. His face is out of frame, hers isn't. She looks content, until the last photo. It was taken indoors. The light was dim, the image fuzzy. She's still in the dress, but her expressions changed. Not fear, not sadness, something locked down. Her hands are in front of her, clenched. There's no background, just shadow. He's behind her, his hand is on her shoulder. I stared at that one the longest. Then I reached for the manila envelope, peeled the tape back, slow and careful. The paper inside had weight, rough texture. The kind that's used for records, not letters. I slid out the top sheet. A report, single-spaced, headed with an official seal that had been stamped over a black bar, marker thick, running through it. Victim, name withheld. Incident type, domestic, suspicious circumstances. Suspect Jennings, T.R. The rest was redacted. Line after line blacked out. Whole paragraphs hidden behind ink. But that one line sat there, untouched. Suspect Jennings, T.R. my father. I read it again. Suspect Jennings, T.R. It didn't make sense. The rest of the page was a blackout blocks of redacted paragraphs, like someone had run a paint roller over the truth. But that one line stood untouched. Centered. Unavoidable, he wasn't a witness. He wasn't a relative, he was the suspect. My throat tightened. I flipped through the rest of the envelope. More pages. More heavy paper, all sealed with the same seal, the same stamp, the same brutal blackouts. Paragraphs stripped to single words. Blood, unresponsive, female subject. One report had a photo clipped to the top corner, a close-up of a doorway, something dark smeared on the frame. I didn't want to guess what it was. Another sheet had what looked like a timeline. It was half-legible, dates typed in the margin. July 5, July 6, July 7, the rest, gone, sharp marker lines, just enough left to show something happened. Quickly. None of it made sense. Not with who I knew, who I thought I knew. My dad was strict, distant, but he wasn't violent. At least not in the way that would leave blood on a wedding dress and an envelope full of sealed files. Still, I kept flipping, hoping, dreading. Near the bottom of the stack was a chain of custody form. It listed items taken from a residence. The last entry caught my eye. Item 7, white dress, fabric sample retained for analysis. I looked at the chest, the dress. They gave it back, or maybe someone kept it when they weren't supposed to. The signature on the bottom of the form was smudged, but the date was clear. July 9, 1985. The last page wasn't redacted. It was a typed memo. A single line centered. Case closed by order, no further investigation. File sealed, non-disclosable. There was no explanation, no ending, just a full stop. I looked at the photos again, the woman in the dress, my face on someone else's story, and him standing behind her, smiling in some, staring in others. I felt cold all over. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I Googled everything. I searched for hours, every name, every date, every keyword I could pull from the fragments in the file. Jennings. July 1985. Missing bride, suspicious wedding, domestic homicide, nothing, no articles. No headlines, no obituaries, not even a whisper. The wedding chapel from the photos didn't come up in reverse image searches. I tried location filters, county records, old newspaper archives. The names of the officers barely visible under the redacted lines. Every lead dead-ended into blank pages or no records found. It was like someone had scrubbed the whole thing from history. Even when I tried to look up my father's military service records, I hit a wall. The online request returned a red banner, restricted file, clearance required, not denied, restricted, like he wasn't just a soldier, like he belonged to something deeper. Hidden, I called 3 local courthouses, asked about old incident reports. They couldn't find anything connected to the case number on the top corner of the memo. One clerk even asked, "Are you sure that's a real number?" I wasn't. I dug deeper, into genealogy sites, missing persons databases, even Reddit forums where amateur sleuths shared unsolved cases. The woman in the photo. No matches, no names, no brides gone missing on that date. Not in state, not out. It was like she never existed. Every thread I pulled came up clean. Too clean. I didn't know what was worse, the idea that something had happened to her or that no one had ever looked. I closed my laptop sometime after midnight, hands aching from scrolling, my eyes dry and raw. The files were still spread across the desk. The dress still folded inside the chest. The bouquet beside it, stems crumbling at the edges. Someone had buried her, not in the ground, in silence. And my father. He carried that silence until it buried him too. I waited 2 days before I asked my mother. Not because I didn't want to know, I did, but because I wasn't ready to see her face when I asked. I wasn't ready to watch her lie, or worse, tell the truth. She was sitting on the back porch, knees covered with a fleece blanket, watching the wind push dead leaves across the deck. She'd been quieter since the funeral. Lighter, in a way. Like something had lifted and she didn't miss the weight. I sat next to her. She didn't look at me, just said, "You found the key, didn't you?" I nodded. We sat like that for a long time. Then I asked, "Was he married before you?" Her face didn't change. Not at first. But her fingers curled slightly into the blanket and her mouth tightened like a reflex, like she'd rehearsed this moment without knowing it. She didn't ask why. She didn't pretend not to know what I meant. She just said, "He loved a woman before me." I waited for more. She gave me only silence. Finally, I said, "Who was she?" "I don't know," she said. "He never told me her name." "But you knew." I knew there had been someone before, someone important. Did he say what happened to her? She shook her head. I never asked. "Why not?" She turned to look at me then, really look at me. "Because some men carry things they can't speak about, and if you ask them to, they come apart." I didn't know if she meant that as a defense or a warning, but it didn't matter. because now I knew what he'd been carrying. And I wasn't the one coming apart. The back of the photo had a date. Faint, almost faded into the paper grain, written in a fine, looping script, probably hers. July 5, 1985. I stared at it for a long time. That wedding photo, that dress, that man, that day. It rattled around in my head, rearranging the timeline I'd carried my whole life. I was born in August 1986, 14 months after the date on the photo. Which meant, I ran the numbers again just to be sure. July 85 to August 86, just over a year. Long enough for someone to disappear, long enough for someone else to start over. Long enough for a man to remarry and raise a daughter who never thought to question why she didn't look like her mother. I felt sick. It wasn't just the possibility that he had a life before this one. It was the precision of the replacement. The silence. The way my mother had never mentioned another woman, not even once, like she'd been told not to, or like she was afraid to. I pulled out the photo again. Her smile wasn't wide, it was close-lipped, careful. Like someone who smiled for the camera, but not for the man beside her. And he looked younger, yes, but not happier, not like a groom, more like someone completing a mission. I flipped the photo back over. The ink was smudged in the corner. Maybe from a thumb, maybe from blood. Maybe both. I laid it beside the bouquet, which was now breaking apart at the ribbon. Dried petals scattered on the desk like flakes of skin. The office smelled different now. Not like cedar and leather anymore. Something colder, like air that had been trapped too long. I hadn't known her name. But the date changed everything. Because now I had to ask the question I hadn't wanted to ask before. Was I born into a family? Or into a lie? The dress was torn at the waist. I hadn't noticed it right away. The blood drew all the attention. The stain across the front, dried and rust brown, warped the eye. But when I unfolded the fabric with gloved hands and laid it out across the plastic sheeting, I saw it. The rip wasn't along a seam. It didn't fray like an old hem or unravel like rot. It had been torn. Jagged, uneven, sharp. The kind of tear that doesn't happen by accident. The kind that comes from being yanked, from a struggle. From someone grabbing a fistful of fabric and pulling hard enough to destroy it. My stomach flipped. It wasn't just a blood-stained dress. It was a fight. I stepped back and stared at it. The color had faded with time, but the memory was still embedded in the fabric. The violence wasn't loud, but it was clear. Something happened to her, something sudden, something physical, something that no one ever wrote down in a file they expected anyone to read. I leaned closer. There were faint markings just above the tear, something like handprints bruising the fabric. A residue, maybe, dust, old skin oil. I wasn't an expert, I didn't know what to call it. But it was there. Proof. I took photos, not to post, not to send, just to preserve. Because I still didn't know if I was going to turn any of this in. I didn't know what I wanted. Answers, closure, justice, revenge. I folded the dress as gently as I could and placed it back into the chest. Not stuffed, placed, like it deserved care. And when I picked up the bouquet again, something fell loose from the ribbon. A scrap of paper, folded into a triangle, wedged tight into the knot like it had been hidden. I stared at it for a long time before unfolding it. The handwriting was hers. The ink faded but readable. One line, slanted across the center. If anything happens to me, he's not who he says. It was dated. July 4, 1985. The night before the wedding. I read the note 10 times. If anything happens to me, he's not who he says. No signature, no greeting. Just that one sentence, like a whispered confession stuffed into silk and florals. Like she knew she didn't have time to write more, or she knew no one would listen until it was too late. The handwriting was elegant, but shaky, like her hand was unsteady. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she'd already seen something she couldn't explain away. The date in the corner made my skin crawl. July 4, 1985. One day before the photo. One day before the blood. One day before she disappeared from everything, records, databases, memory. She left a message. And he kept it. Buried it with her dress, her flowers, her face. Why? Why keep the note? Why keep the dress? Why not burn it all like the rest of the paper trail? Unless he couldn't. Unless this chest wasn't a shrine or a hiding place, but something worse. A box full of guilt, or proof, or memory. I placed the note beside the photos and stared at them all together. The dress, the bouquet, the envelope full of redacted silence. And this, the only sentence that hadn't been blacked out. I wasn't sure what terrified me more. The possibility that my father killed her, or the possibility that someone else did, and he let it happen, and then built a new life like she had never existed. The note felt warm in my hand. I wasn't imagining that. The paper was warm, like it had been waiting to be touched again, like it had been waiting for someone to finally believe her. I had to know more. One of the reports had names on it, officers, initials, a list of assigned personnel. Most of it was smudged or crossed out, but one name was still legible. Detective C. Madsen, retired probably, but still alive. Hopefully. I picked up the phone. It took 6 calls to find him. The first number was disconnected. The second was someone's ex-wife who hung up the second I said Madsen. Third one went straight to voicemail. The fourth and fifth weren't him, but the sixth, a dry voice answered. Yeah, Detective Madsen. A pause then. Used to be. I introduced myself, gave my name, my father's name, another pause, longer this time. Jennings, he said finally, like the word had dust on it. You're his daughter. I am. More silence. I found something, I said. In his house, in a chest, files, a wedding dress, there was blood. He didn't respond. I thought maybe the call dropped. Then he exhaled, slow and heavy. That chest was never supposed to be opened. I need to know what happened, I said. I need you to tell me. I can't. You were the detective on the case. Your name's in the report. I was on the case, he snapped, until it wasn't ours anymore. What does that mean? It means someone higher up made it disappear. Was she murdered? Another silence. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. Why was he never charged? Madsen's voice dropped. Because it stopped being a local case the second someone realized who he worked for. That chest, that was his insurance policy. That was him making sure no one ever forgot. Or maybe he wanted someone to find it, eventually. I found a note, I said, from her, dated the night before. I heard the creak of a chair, a long inhale. Then you've got more than we ever did. Who was she? I don't know. Did you ever? He didn't answer. I was about to push again when he cut me off. You think knowing the truth is going to bring her back? He asked. It won't. All you'll get is her blood on your hands instead of his. And then, just before the line went dead, you were never supposed to find that chest. The dream started that night. Not slow, not symbolic. No strange metaphors or warped memories. Just her, the woman from the photos, standing in the center of a dark hallway I didn't recognize, wearing the dress, the blood fresh, still wet. She never said anything. She never moved. She just stared at me like I was late. The first time I woke up choking. Not gasping, choking, like something was in my throat. My hands went straight to my neck, nails digging in. Nothing was there. Just sweat and the lingering scent of fabric that wasn't mine. The second dream was worse. She was at the edge of my bed, eyes wide, not angry, not pleading, just watching, like she was waiting for me to do something, finish something. When I tried to speak, I couldn't. My voice wouldn't come out. She reached forward slowly and touched my wrist. I felt it. Felt her hand on me, cold and dry and steady. When I woke up, there was a faint smudge on my skin. Like ash, I scrubbed it, but it didn't go away right away. By the fourth night, I stopped sleeping. I kept the dress sealed in plastic now. The bouquet, too. The files were in a locked drawer, but it didn't matter. She followed me. Every time I closed my eyes, she was there, not haunting me, waiting. That's what it felt like, not vengeance, not fear, expectation. She wasn't asking me to understand. She was asking me to act. I took one final photo of the dress, laid it out beneath the harsh yellow light of the garage. Gloves on, plastic underneath. Every detail captured: the torn waist, the dried blood, the frayed lace at the neckline, the bruised silk. I stood over it for a long time. Then I folded it one last time. Not like clothing, like evidence. The bouquet went next, wrapped in a separate sheet of plastic, stems crumbling, petals detached. I placed it in a box I'd reinforced with layers of tape, cardboard, more tape. Every layer felt like a seal. Then the Polaroids, the note, the redacted reports, the custody form, a printout of the date on the back of the photo. A transcript I typed out myself, the call with Madsen, word for word. I labeled it in all caps, black marker. Anonymous evidence, 1985 unresolved case. I didn't include my name, didn't include his either. I wasn't trying to clear him, I was trying to unbury her. I taped the box shut. My hands shook while doing it, not because I was afraid, because I was sure. Sure this needed to leave my house. Sure it didn't belong to me anymore. She'd waited long enough. I loaded the box into my car, didn't call ahead. Didn't check which detectives were on duty. Didn't choose the precinct listed in the file. I picked a different one, far enough away that no one would recognize the name Jennings. I drove in silence. And when I reached the station, I walked in and left the box on the front desk without saying a word. They didn't call. They didn't trace the package. They didn't even post about it publicly. But 3 weeks later, at 2:14 in the morning, I found it. A small article buried on a local news site, wedged between a DUI arrest and a bake sale announcement. Cold case under review after anonymous tip. No photo, no names, just a 3-paragraph update. A sealed file from 1985 has been reopened after new evidence was submitted to authorities last month. The case, classified at the time due to external agency involvement, was previously ruled as closed without charge. The police department has declined to comment further, citing the sensitivity of the materials received. I read it 4 times, screenshot it, printed it, held it in my hand like a passport. The wording was vague, deliberately careful, but it was real. They opened it. Someone finally opened it. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't even smile. I just sat at the kitchen table, barefoot, back hunched, staring at the glow of my laptop screen and whispered, "Good." She wasn't gone anymore. She wasn't sealed in a chest. She wasn't redacted out of history. She wasn't just a face that looked like mine in a photo no one would explain. She was a case, an open one, and maybe, just maybe, one day she'd be a name again too. My mother asked me if I regret it. We were in the garden. She was trimming the hedges like it mattered, like the world hadn't shifted a few inches off-center. I hadn't told her about the box, or the news article, but she knew something had changed. She always knew. She didn't look at me when she asked. "Do you regret it?" she murmured, like she was asking about a job or a move, not the unearthing of a woman my father tried to erase. "No," I said. She clipped a dead rose off the bush. "He loved you, you know." "I know. And he loved me," she said, quieter, "in his way." I didn't respond, not because I disagreed, because I believed her. He did love us in the same way he locked things up, controlled, silent, clean. "But whatever he was to you," I said, "he was someone else before you." She froze, the shears hung in midair, blades half closed, her eyes fixed on the hedge like she'd stopped seeing it. Then she nodded. One small, tired motion. "I used to wonder," she said. "In the first few years before you were born, I'd hear him get up in the night, walk around, not restless, just haunted. Did you ever ask?" I learned not to. I sat down beside her. "She left something behind," I said, "in the bouquet." That made her turn. "A note," I added. She knew something might happen to her. My mother didn't speak for a long time. Then, I think I knew that too. Somewhere inside me, I think I always knew there was someone else, and that he never fully let her go. I looked at her. "Do you hate him?" She took a breath, let it out slow. "No. But I think he was afraid of what would happen if someone ever saw all of him. And now someone had." She moved through the house like something had been broken and set right in the same breath. Not lighter, not heavier, just honest. I stayed a few more days, helped her sort through the rest of his things. A few boxes of books, clothes that still smelled like him, a drawer full of foreign coins he never explained. We didn't touch the office. Not again. The chest was empty now. Everything inside it had been passed on, not to the authorities, not to the press, to her. The woman who smiled in the photo, who wrote a note no one was supposed to read. The woman who bled into silk and vanished. We gave it back to her. Whatever the world did next, whether the case was solved or buried again, it wasn't mine to carry anymore. I did what she asked, even if she never said it out loud. She stopped showing up in my dreams. The hallway, the blood, the silence, it all faded, not erased, just at peace. I packed my bag the night before I left. My mother watched from the doorway, said nothing. her face calm in a way I hadn't seen since the funeral, like something unspoken between them had finally been named. Before I zipped up my suitcase, I went into the office one last time. The light was dim. The air still had that faint trace of cedar and dust. The chest sat where it always had, open, hollow, quiet. I reached down, closed the lid, turned the key in the lock. Then I picked it up, walked it to the attic, and slid it into the farthest corner. No ceremony, no sentiment. Just done. The house was quiet when I left. No more footsteps pacing at night. No more low voices through the walls. No more questions thick in the air like fog. Just stillness. I walked through each room slowly, not to remember, to make sure it all stayed behind. My bag was in the trunk, the keys in my hand. I only hesitated once in the doorway of the office. The desk was clear, the shelves untouched. The chest was gone. It left a square in the carpet, a faded outline like a scar that would never quite disappear. That's all he left behind. Not medals, not journals, not truths spoken out loud. Just weight. And the woman who'd carried that weight alone, right up until the moment he decided she didn't get to carry anything ever again. I stood there for a minute longer. Then I whispered into the empty room, she deserved to be found. Not for me. For her, even if no one ever says her name, even if her story stays redacted, even if the case gets closed again, boxed up in some other drawer, left to rot behind protocol and fear. She's not invisible anymore. She's not silent, I see her now. And that's how I left the house, not haunted, not hollow, but aware. I didn't take the key with me, I locked the chest, stored it away, and let the door close behind me. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.